They don't want any part of that. There's no place for that. They've already been through this. They don't want this they don't want this kind of insolence out there. Okay? There's no place for it. And we have a place in the galactic family, but we have to also know that place. And knowing that place takes a tremendous amount of introspection, really genuinely looking at ourselves. You know, let's go back to some of the things that were said very early in the contacts. Before the A's actually decided to intervene, there was a great deal of discussion regarding Earth within the Andromedan Council. Now, that is where a lot of planetary systems meet. It isn't run or owned by the A's. It's a location, so they call it that. Okay, it's easy for everybody in that area to meet there. And there were many that were opposed to doing anything to help us. And let's focus on those reasons. They don't respect themselves. They don't respect each other. They don't respect their home planet. What is their value? Now let's look at the Earth. Let's look at ourselves today. Has it changed any? Has it changed any? We have free energy. We have free technology. Okay, we have the technological means to create that. And yet, we're about to fight World War III over oil? You know? So we can drive our cars and our trucks when those engines have been obsolete for 70 years? We know this. This isn't rocket science. This is out there already. Okay? We're looking at a war over water when instead of feeding the military-industrial complex, we could be building desalination plants all over the world so everybody could have water, so they could grow crops. But are we doing it? Hell no. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to empower people to grow food and take care of themselves? Then we can't control them. This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about.
So back to the Pleiadians. Let me get a little history on the Pleiadians. Tell me about what Atlantis was and how the Pleiadians were involved in it.
Atlantis was an extraterrestrial colony. There were many races coming and going. It was kind of the analogy that I've been given was like a truck stop. You had planetary systems moving in and out of our galaxy, and this was one of the stops. One, because of its location. Two, because of its minerals, its amazing different type of life forms, and many of those life forms were brought to Earth in full form, just so you know. Which is why we can't find, the evolution in the fossil record. It's because they were brought here in full form. So it was a colony. There were many races coming in. Many of them were human, many of them were not. There were all kinds of experiments going on here. You had human extraterrestrials, the giants, commingling with women of our world, leaving offspring. Many of them became royal lines. Others were hunted down and killed by other races because they were half-breeds. So and if you remember in the early notes, the A said that prejudice was an extraterrestrial perspective. This was something that we had been taught by the extraterrestrial races themselves, which clearly shows, they had some maturing to do. They were going through a growth curve. Hopefully all those races have, but apparently not, because we still have some regressive races that are here doing their thing. Hiding behind us, essentially. It was an extraterrestrial colony, which is why it was so technologically advanced. People were coming and races were coming and going. And that all ended in a war, in another war. And from what I understand, it was the Pleiadians who took out Atlantis. So, and that's a whole nother conversation.
You also, I think, expressed that the Andromedans said that those left behind on Earth were supposed to be protected by the Pleiadians.
Yes.
And what happened there?
They left. They didn't stick around. And other races came in. And not only took refuge, but created underground colonies for themselves, and essentially began the very slow process of managing us, controlling us, and at some point they started using us as a natural resource.
Are those the ones that have created the program, as you call it?
They're a very integral part of the program. That is correct.
How has the moon and those other races associated with the moon affected Earth humanity, and what's the history there?
Oh God, that's no small question. What I've been taught was that the moon showed up somewhere around 11,600 to 12,000 years ago. It was brought here. We know it's hollow. It came from, I believe, Ursa Minor, from a star system called Chauta. And it used to be a craft of some sort. And, in the early years of space travel, many of the planet-faring races now, when they first started, they didn't have all the natural resources to build huge craft. So what they would do is they would use smaller craft, and they would go out and try to capture moons, asteroids, things like that. And then what they would do is they would move them into their orbit safely, and then they would hollow them out and use them as spacecraft. Build the craft on the inside, so now they have all the raw materials they need on the outside. Build the craft, a propulsion system, your life support systems, things like that on the inside of these moons, and then they would use that as the craft. As opposed to using all of your natural resources to build the shell of the ship. They didn't have to do that now, all right? It's just really smart. So, briefly, that's the story of the moon. That's dealt with in Defending Sacred Ground.
Now, the Aryans, the Maldekians, how are they associated with the moon? And who are they?
Well, they're essentially the same. If you look at the Aryan race per se, it's a combination of Orion, of a lot of different races. Let me just say that, of different human races. Now, my understanding is that during one of the last pole shifts, they hid underground facilities that were built for them in the Himalayas because it was going to be safe there. And after the pole shift occurred and things began to settle, they came out. But apparently not all of them have come out. There is still a very small group that live inside the mountain, underground, who literally want no part of the surface. So that's how I could address that. And I think this is documented in history books where the Anglo-Saxon race, the white race, came out of the plateaus of the Himalayas in ancient history, and moved down through India and just migrated to different areas of the world. I also understand that they had some advanced technology that was used as well. They had access to that.
What's their influence been on humanity? Has it been positive, negative? What kind of influence?
I would probably have to say both. It's Rick, you could take any piece of information, any philosophical belief, and you could turn it for positive or for negative. But ultimately, the decision to buy into that belief system, whether it's light or it's dark or positive or negative, is us. There have been a lot of ideas that have just gone by